Welcome to Monobiology. Today we're going to look at the human brain, more specifically, and we're going to look at the different parts. As you can see here, I have a label diagram that you can use to label your diagram that you've been given. You can ignore on your diagram the letters. You can use them, but also there's more things that you're going to want to label. As we go through, I'll identify the things that you should label, and you can label them. The first thing that I want to point out about this is that this is a human brain. Okay, so mammalian brains would look similar to this, although human brains have special features. As we go through, I'll discuss what those are. Okay, let's start in the primitive brain, which would be this area right here. Okay, so most animals that have brains have all this stuff that you see right here. All right, so down here we have the medulla, also known as the medulla oblongata. Okay, here we have the pons. It kind of is a bump in the brainstem here. This little guy right here you're familiar with, we've talked about him before, is the pituitary. Okay, and then right above the pituitary, although it's kind of hard to identify in this picture, would be the hypothalamus, again, another part of the brain we've already talked about, dealing with the endocrine system. And then the thalamus itself would be this area right here. Okay, over here, towards the back of the brain, by the way, this would be the front of the person's body, and this would be the back, in case you were wondering. So this would be the ventral side, and this would be the dorsal side. This little area right here is called the pineal gland. Okay? All right. This thing here, the inferior colliculus, is not something we are going to discuss in this course. Neither is the superior colliculus, so you can ignore those. Okay? The brainstem, you do need to know midbrain, pons, medulla. There's the spinal cord. There's the pituitary, hypothalamus, thalamus. The fornix is not something we talk about. Neither is the cingulate gyrus, so you don't need to worry about those. This white area here is the corpus callosum. Okay? Now, it's an area, more specifically, that allows the left side of your brain to communicate with the right side of your brain. Okay, we'll talk more about that a little bit later on, but basically, this area here allows the left and right side of your brain to communicate with one another. Very important. Okay, I'm going to go over what some of these do, but we've already talked about the pituitary and the hypothalamus. I want you to make sure you have notes on the thalamus. I'm not going to give those to you. The midbrain, pons, and medulla, what are they responsible for? And I'm going to go, the next few that we're going to talk about, I'm going to go through the basic definitions, but again, you're responsible for making sure you read the textbook, look on the internet, get some solid definitions that, make sure you understand the importance of each of these things. Okay, so hypothalamus we did. Let's go with cerebellum. Okay, so this area right here, brown area of this picture, is the cerebellum. Now that area of the brain is responsible for the coordination and balance that humans have. Any animal, really, but more specifically humans. Humans walk on 2 legs, where most animals walk on 4. So we have a specialized cerebellum that allows us to do that, because it's a lot harder to balance on 2 legs than it is on 4. So our cerebellum will be much more specialized than a lot of other organisms. Okay, so there's the cerebellum, and it's responsible for coordination and balance. It also actually controls a little bit of muscle tone. Okay, now this area here, the last area that I'm going to give you, this area, it covers the blue section, this kind of red section, the pink section here, and this purpley kind of section here. All of that, this whole area is called the cerebrum. Okay, do not get cerebellum and cerebrum mixed up. Cerebellum is here, has L's in it. Cerebrum's here, no L's. Okay, cerebrum. And now the cerebrum is really cool. It's broken down into 4 parts, as you can see, 4 lobes, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Those 4 areas, okay, combine to make humans what we are. This is where all of our thinking takes place. Okay, what we call our higher level thinking. Now, without getting into too much detail, because I'm going to do that on the next page, basically the cerebrum, this whole area here, is responsible for our consciousness, okay, and all of our higher level thinking. It's also where our memories are created and stored. Okay, so here's another picture. I use colors here. On yours, you won't have any colors, but again, all of these areas you can label as we go through, and I will get to those things as we go through. There's going to be a few times where I'm going to color in a couple other things, and I'll use some different colors to do that as I go through. Now, just really quickly, as it says up here, these are the lobes and specialized areas of the cerebrum. That's how you spell cerebrum from the previous page. So, first of all, the four lobes. You have the frontal lobe. You have the parietal lobe. Okay, so just really quickly, the frontal lobe includes this blue area here called the primary motor cortex. It includes that. The parietal lobe includes this red area here called the primary somatosensory cortex. We'll talk about what that is later. The occipital lobe is this green area here, and that would be at the back of your skull. And the temporal lobe is this yellow area here. You can see the spinal cord down here and the cerebellum. Again, you've already labeled those on the other one, so you don't need to do that here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. I'm going to give you some idea of what each of these lobes is responsible for. Remember I said in the previous slide that these are responsible, the cerebrum is responsible for your consciousness and your higher level thinking, your memories and your storage of memories. So the frontal lobe includes motor areas involved with voluntary muscle and movement. Okay, so voluntary means it's under our control. So this whole area here specifically, but this whole area here does that. It allows us to control our fine motor skills. Okay, so let's say for example we learned how to play a sport. Okay, this area here, all the muscles that we use and the coordination of our body to do that, all of the memories and the what we call muscle memory for that would all be stored in here. Okay? That's one of the things the frontal lobe does. The other thing that the frontal lobe does is it's linked to our intellectual activities. Okay? So how we think and also how we act, our personality. Okay? So our inhibition to do bad things, our prevention, the area that prevents us from doing bad things, the little devil and angel that sit on your shoulder, that would come from the frontal lobe. Okay? So personality, intellectual ability, and also voluntary movement, frontal lobe. Parietal lobe is involved with the senses, all of the senses. This area right here, somatosensory, that's all of our senses right here. Okay? But more specifically, it deals with touch and temperature awareness. So our sense of touch, the memories for that would be stored in here, and new sensations here, but also temperature awareness. So if something's hot or cold. The next lobe, the temporal lobe, is also a sensory area, and those are linked with vision, so our sense of sight, and also our sense of hearing. It also allows us, this area here is linked to our ability to interpret sensory information. So if I see something, it kind of goes through the temporal lobe, and I can connect it to other things I've seen. I can compare it to other things I've seen. Okay, so it's linked to that. The occipital lobe here at the back most specifically is involved with our sense of sight. So a lot of our memories and our ability to connect memories to sight are stored in the occipital lobe. And it also allows us to interpret that visual information, like I said, and make connections between it. Okay, so those are the lobes. Motor cortex, voluntary movement, somatosensory, all of our senses. And then each area has their own ability to connect information to memories that we've learned or things that we've encountered. Okay, so we've already talked about the motor cortex and the somatosensory cortex. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw in a couple of areas, okay? So there's an area in the frontal lobe kind of right in here. Okay, this area right here that is associated with speech. Okay, so our ability to speak, our ability to understand and interpret that stuff, the muscle coordination, our lips moving and our mouth moving in certain ways, right there. Okay? This area that you see, the olfactory bulb, it goes from about there. So it kind of crosses over two lobes. So that whole area there is our sense of olfactory. Now, if you're not sure, the word olfactory, anytime you see that, it's involved with our sense of smell. Okay? So there's that. Specifically at the bottom of the primary somatosensory, that's our visual cortex right there. Or sorry, not visual. Auditory cortex is right there. Okay? Our visual cortex is at the back of the occipital lobe. Right there is our visual cortex. Okay, so those are specialized areas of the brain that help us relay and interpret and also remember certain aspects of our senses, ones that are important. Okay? That in a nutshell are the different areas of the brain. And don't forget, write down your notes on here, but also use your textbook, other sources available to you to make sure you have good definitions. The key here is you want to understand why each of these areas is important, not just the basic definitions. Bring your questions to class and have a good day.